You're listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Now, it is time to break it down.
Welcome to episode number 42 of the Sonny Brown Breakdown. I'm your host Sonny Brown, and in this episode I talk to Erik Uresk. Erik is a Judo and Jiu-Jitsu black belt and former professional mixed martial arts fighter who's now transitioned into a coaching role. He's previously coached out of Phuket top team in Thailand, but he now works at Alliance MMA in San Diego, coaching many notable fighters such as Dominic Cruz, Phil Davis, and Jeremy Stevens. Coming from a turbulent upbringing, we discuss his start into the mixed martial arts world and how he now advocates for embracing vulnerability in his training and using it to help conquer adversity. We discuss this coaching philosophy further and the challenges he's faced when using it while working with those high-level athletes, particularly while working with Dominic Cruz, who of course has such an extensive knowledge of martial arts that coaching him proved to be a unique circumstance. We then go into gaining trust from athletes and how you can generate that buy-in from the athletes so they will actually listen to you. So it was a very interesting chat, goes deep into some areas, so I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please feel free to drop a 5-star review over on iTunes and send any feedback you might have through to sonnybrown@gmail.com. Also follow me on Instagram at sonnybrownbreakdown and check out the transcripts and everything else up at the website at sonnybrown.net. Without further ado, let's go to the podcast. Erik, how are you today, mate?
I'm good, man. Just enjoying my afternoon. I had a session with the boys this morning, so just kind of relaxing for with you for for an hour or so, and then get the rest of my day on.
Awesome. So you've had a lot of experience coaching all around the world, fighting yourself professionally, and I also know you spent a bit of time bouncing and have some good stories from that. And I'm just wondering if you could just give us an overview of kind of how you got into the martial arts. I know you had a rough upbringing to get into things, but kind of what led you down the path of being a martial artist.
So I've been obsessed with martial arts and fighting since I can remember being 4 years old and being obsessed with the Karate Kid, and then being obsessed with movies like Bloodsport and a few other movies, Kickboxer and stuff like that. Just
my favorites.
I was literally obsessed, and I knew at a young age, wow, I want to go fight in the Kumite or something like that. And obviously this is before we understood what really works in a fight and what doesn't. And my family wasn't well off enough to afford martial arts lessons. So, I would go to, we had these things called book fairs as in elementary school, and I'd go and I'd get myself a book that was like a martial arts picture book, and then I would just kind of practice the moves on my brother in the basement. And I don't know, it was just a fascinating thing for me. And then I just started getting in fights, as a young kid, growing up in Long Island, New York. I've probably gotten well over 50 street fights before I was 12 years old. It just that I just like to fight. I think for me, honestly, I wanted to fight because I didn't want to be scared. I grew up in a pretty tumultuous household, and I was kind of scared all the time. And I didn't have any guidance or mentors or anything like that. So it was kind of figuring out a lot of things by myself. And I was always, I'd be scared. I'd be scared that there were bullies in the neighborhood and stuff like that. And I think what intrigued me about fighting and, action stars in movies is that even if they were scared in the beginning, they weren't scared at the end. And, they kicked the ass that they had to kick, and they got the girl at the end. And I think that really kind of intrigued me and motivated me, if I'm honest.
Oh, no, for sure. So, same with me, just kind of that ideal, movie star style, portrayal of martial arts. I think I've, probably got a lot of people, into it, of just, what a great way to go through life. And so how did you then first start going from, the street fights kind of thing? How did you get into start training? What was the first path you took?
Well, wrestling was the first thing I did that was like structured learning of martial arts. So I started wrestling when I was 15, got started kind of late, took to it pretty well. I showed some natural ability early, but I got kicked out of school about a year and a half into learning how to wrestle. And then then I was just kind of like in and out of jails and mental institutions and rehabs and all different kinds of craziness for a good couple of years before I got to start really wrestling again. When I was 20, I started driving into Brooklyn to train with a Russian wrestling team. And actually, while I was away in one of the homes that I was at, I stumbled upon a judo school. And so I started training judo when I was 20 as well. And so that was kind of what I immersed myself in, was Greco-Roman wrestling and judo for a good few years. And I would mess around with jiu-jitsu and grappling and whatever I could find. I mean, this is going back to around the year like 2001 or something, around that time. So there wasn't like one-stop shops for martial arts training. Training was still very primitive, even though the UFC had been out for a good amount of time at that point. So it was all over the place. You know, we'd spar with Muay Thai guys, we'd spar with Kung Fu guys. You know, I would take intro classes at traditional martial arts schools just to go beat up the instructor in front of their students, and all kinds of stuff like that at the time. So like I said, my primary motivation for fighting was to not feel afraid and to make people afraid of me in the beginning. So that's what I would go out and do.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And so when you got into bouncing side of things, was that you'd already had some training?
Yeah, I've been training quite a bit. I had been mixing around a good amount of martial arts training. At some point, I think around like 24, 25, I joined like a local MMA gym that was there, and they were pretty good, and at least for the time. And so I started getting a good mix of training. I think I started bouncing when I was 24, and I was just coming to the end of like really trying to pursue wrestling. And so that's about the time that I started getting into mixed martial arts. So I already had a heavy grappling background with the wrestling and judo by the time I started bouncing in nightclubs. And
I was looking at your MMA record, professional record, and I was looking down at the first fight. And I don't know if, some people, you never know who you're going to get, luck of the draw, but obviously the name stands out. I think you mentioned it was just more of a inter-gym smoker fight. But it did happen to be Frankie Edgar's first fight also. And it's like, in hindsight, that's a tough draw, right?
So that was really interesting. There was this thing called the Underground Combat League that they used to have in New York City, right? Completely illegal. This was not a professional event at all. There was no doctors. There was no weigh-ins. There was none of that. So no commission, nothing. So I was supposed to fight some other dude from his gym, and like when I got there, they told me it was going to be somebody else. And I have a feeling they kind of did that on purpose, but that's neither here nor there. And I was actually like pretty kind of like, I was being looked at as like a good prospect coming up, and so like Frankie wasn't taking it an easy one either. Like, but he knowingly wasn't taking an easy one. And yeah, man, it was a crazy fight. It didn't last long, but it felt like forever. Neither one of us really knew what we were doing. But if I'm not mistaken, and I could totally be wrong, and Frankie, if you hear this and I'm wrong, but I believe the promoter told me that one of the knees that I landed broke his eye socket, and the guy just kept fighting. And I think that was just a foretelling of what kind of toughness he was going to show. I mean, Gray Maynard nearly killed him twice in two of their title fights, and like literally, I'd never seen somebody. I thought he was dead twice in both of those fights, and he came back and to a draw on one of them, and then eventually knocked him out, which is fucking incredible after the way those fights started. And obviously he's a legend, very likely a Hall of Famer. So it's for a long time that was hard for me to. It was very hard for me to. It's always hard to, I think, accept a loss and then to see somebody go on to do such great things. But yeah, it for me, it really kind of highlights the moral and mental deficiencies that I had as a young martial artist. That Frankie was the opposite of that. Frankie was a guy that thrived on adversity, and I was a guy that was trying to get tough so I could hide from adversity. And so when things got adverse in fights, I didn't know how to handle them, largely because even in my training early on, I would win most of my rounds in the gym, and I would beat up most of the guys in the gym, and I avoided positions and situations that made me uncomfortable or made me feel vulnerable. Like I avoided vulnerability like the plague for a long, long time, and much to my detriment. I think like I retired when I was 35, and I think in like the last 2 years of my career, and I really didn't get to fight much, I started confronting that, and the gains that I've made since then, even as I continue to just, I'm pretty much just doing grappling and jiu-jitsu now, but the gains that I've made since I've really embraced working through vulnerabilities have been, it's night and day. And it's something that I really, really, really hammer down on the fighters that I work with, or anybody that's listening to anything that I have to say. Is like, we all have an ego to some degree. There's things that we're all afraid of, losing, looking stupid, looking bad, not feeling in control, whatever it is, that we're afraid of. We all kind of have some of that stuff to varying degrees, but it's really, really, really important to confront it and not hide from it.
Yeah, and that's sometimes very difficult for people who are like looking to fight, as they need that confidence, right? They need that confidence that I am invincible. That's what's going to give them the ability in their mind to be able to fight. That feeling that I'm going to be unstoppable. I'm going straight to the top. And then obviously they don't want to be put in those situations. How do you kind of, balance that?
So I guess there's a couple of different answers for that question, right? Me personally, I don't do well with guys that I have to shield from their insecurities. And there are guys that you can get to win fights by not giving them hard rounds in sparring, like keeping them confident going into the fight. I have a real adverse reaction to that whole premise. And maybe it's just a fixed idea for me, but for me, confidence comes through preparation. And, not every day is going to feel good in the gym, but I believe there's like no greater confidence than overcoming adversity and routinely overcoming adversity. And then not that there's not days where we want you to relax and have maybe a little bit easier rounds where you can be creative. Like there needs to be different intensities and different periodizing of training. It can't be like always all hard all the time, but there has to be a regular familiarity with vulnerability and discomfort in a fighter's training, in my opinion. I think that's why you see when guys start to run their own camps, I almost always know that this is the downfall of that fighter's career, that we're going to see. It might not be this fight, but the next couple fights, we're going to see a drastic decline in their performance because human nature generally dictates that we will not push ourselves as harder as an outside set of eyes will most of the time, right? It's very hard to be objective running your own training sessions. So can you be successful without dealing with adversity and hiding yourself from those type of vulnerabilities? Yes, you can. Can you get the most out of yourself? I don't think so. Right. So there's a huge difference between being successful, I guess, in a broad use of the term, like winning fights. Yeah, you can win fights purely based on your athleticism, but there will come a time and place where adversity strikes, and then it's like, how familiar are you with that feeling? Right. It's like, think about like you could be fit, right? You could be like crazy at CrossFit and do all that stuff, and then try jiu-jitsu. And why will your cardio go out the window in 5 minutes in jiu-jitsu? Because of the discomfort with the ranges of motion and your lack of knowledge with the terrain, right? It's just so discombobulating and poor use of energy and all that stuff. So how do you, as you get more familiar with jiu-jitsu, you start to relax. It's not that you get in better shape a lot of times if you're already in shape. You just learn sort of how to relax a little bit more and deal with the discomfort and the vulnerable. Jiu-jitsu is a very vulnerable thing. Even if you're just talking, not let alone like a fight, right? A fight is in my opinion far more of a vulnerable feeling. Once the punches and kicks start flying, it's definitely a different animal. So yeah, I think it's absolutely like imperative that a combat athlete of any sport get fully acquainted with vulnerability, discomfort, whatever, pain, whatever you want to call it.
And then, obviously that sounds good. But what if you've got, a fighter who says, Erik, look, I just like the things like I just want to, I want to do the things that I'm feeling good at. I'm feeling that's boosting my confidence. I just want to be feeling good in training. I don't want to do it. Like, why should I go through the process of putting someone on my back, choking me out? I'm just gonna knock the guy out. That's my game plan. I don't need to do that stuff. How do you deal with someone who might come at you like that?
So we'll have a conversation, and I'll listen to their input. And then if we can't come to like an understanding, I might have to say, you know what, I don't think I'm the coach for you.
Yeah.
And that might be the truth. Like that guy might do great under somebody that wants to, cater to those tendencies of his a little bit more. And maybe I'm hard-headed, and maybe, I really deal well with guys that come from wrestling backgrounds the best, because they're just used to that. Like you don't really have to have that conversation with guys that wrestled at a decent level. It generally doesn't have to happen. It's not a rule, but man, it is so much easier because they are used to that. They are used to that grind all the time. And that's not to say that you have to wear your body down and break yourself every training session, because I don't think that that's useful either. I think it's good to have fun, but I think what I'm interested in is people that want to be great. And you might never get great, but just the fact that you want to be great. And I think like if that's your mindset, I want to be great, those are the people that I notice again and again, right? And man, I've been in the gym and trained with like more world champions than I can count on both hands, right? And I notice a common trend, and it's not a rule, but it's a common trend, that these guys get obsessed about the stuff that they're not good at. And if that's not your mindset, at least to some degree, I probably don't want to work with you. And that's cool. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. That doesn't, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
First of all, fighting's not for everybody, man. It's really not. Like if you end up fighting in a cage for money as a grown adult, something probably went wrong somewhere, right? Like,
yeah, I joke about that too. It's like there's got to be something that a rational choice doesn't. A rational choice.
It's not generally a choice for the well-adjusted. So. But it's cool. It's a great opportunity to learn and forge yourself in a fashion that you might not have gotten to otherwise. And
and it can be fun.
It can, and it's a lot of fun, man. But not every coach is meant for every athlete. I don't want to coach every athlete. And that's not to say that I haven't had to sort of take a look at my approach and see if there's different ways I can reach different fighters, right? Because absolutely, it's always easiest to work with the guys or women that you mesh with naturally. But yeah, I don't want to deviate too far from the success that I've had. That like having passion and fire for something. If I have more passion and fire for your fight career than you do, then there's a problem, right? And yeah, I'm fine with not working with you if that's the case, But if somebody comes in and they're full of fire and they're willing to trust and do what's asked of them and be uncomfortable, then yeah, man, let's do it. I'll go to the end with you if that's your attitude.
Nice. I think that's pretty reasonable. And your transition then from fighter to coach, I believe it was while you're at Phuket Top Team over in Thailand.
Yeah.
Take me through, how that happened, when you decided to make that change, and then where you went from there.
Sure. So I got to Phuket Top Team in 2014. I believe it was like the summer of 2014. I had been in San Diego for 4 years with Alliance MMA, and I was having a hard time getting fights. And things just felt like they were stale and at a standstill. And so I had some friends that I knew from growing up that were out there, the Leone brothers that own Bali MMA. And so I started talking with them about what the scene's like out there. And it just so happened they were getting ready to go do their own thing in Bali. And so some positions started opening up. So I kind of stepped in to do, teach some wrestling there. And I was going to fight and do that. And so I was there for, I was there for a year. And I was in a really bad place mentally for that whole year. And so I left for about 8 months. I ended up coming back just at random. I was living in the UK for a little bit, and that didn't work out. So I just kind of went back to Thailand to see where things kind of fall. And I went back there I would structure my training the best way I knew how. And so everybody started just kind of following the structure that I was following, because the structure was super loose when I got there. It was very relaxed. And, not that the training wasn't good, but the structure was quite loose. And I really believe in like a tight team structure is really what yields like the best results. If you're not in a huge gym like an AKA or an ATT, they have so many guys, they can afford to be a little bit looser in the structure. But when it's a smaller gym, I think it's important to have some structure. So I would be structuring my own drill sessions and all this stuff. And so guys just kind of started following me around. And yeah, so I was kind of like the by proxy head coach until I decided to retire. I had a fight get canceled the week of the fight, and this has happened to me more times than I can count. And so I just realized at that moment I was not willing to do that again, and I wasn't willing to put in what I know is necessary for a fight camp. I'm not going to be one of those guys that keeps himself in a little bit of shape. Like, I only know how to get ready for a fight one way, and it's give your entire life into fight camp. And at 35, I wasn't willing to do that anymore. And I knew it was time to retire. And so, yeah, basically I messaged Boyd. I said, I want to retire, but I'd like to step into the role as the formal head coach. Like, I had been basically the head coach role for quite a while before that, while trying to manage my career. But then I also, then stepping into that role formally was, it was just a matter of me not fighting anymore. And so that's it, man. We just got started. And yeah, within a year of that decision, Phuket Top Team really took off, and, we did some incredible things over the next couple of years. And it was a great time. I miss Thailand a lot. I hope to get back there in the next, coming years.
Nice. And did that team structure that you like training under, I'm going to take a guess that possibly came from, your background in wrestling, because it is something over here as well that we, have to try and develop within our gyms, as we, there aren't those big super camps, so to say, where there's all those people. So was that the wrestling background kind of structuring that? And then how was that then integrating with being in Thailand, where maybe you've got a lot of tourists and people just coming in for a week or two?
So the philosophy, the training philosophy and the structure that I took with me was the same training structure that we had at Alliance MMA in San Diego. And that's what really attracted me to that gym. Prior to being there, I was training at Extreme Couture in Las Vegas. And it was a great gym. I had a great time there. And I was planning on going back there. I had just stopped into San Diego to help Dominic Cruz with one of his camps. It was still WEC at the time. And I really, really liked how the team did everything together, and like the coach kind of had everything prescribed of what everybody was going to do on us. Like, particularly like each morning, like team training was mandatory, and then what you did in the evenings was a bit more subjective, but it was pretty much like him kind of controlling and letting us know all of that stuff. And so I was like, wow, this takes a lot of like the guesswork out of it. And everybody was in the gym trying to help each other all the time. And so I kind of just took that with me to Phuket. I was like, I've seen this fucking recipe work before. I think like 2015, 2016, something like that. Alliance MMA was like considered like one of the top 3 gyms in the world at the time. Like we were really doing a lot of big things and world titles and different organizations. And so yeah, it was a den of killers, man. Like it was a tough gym. And yeah, so I saw that worked. I knew it worked. And so I brought that with me. I was like, there's no way. And I was a bit arrogant at the time, like coming from that gym and training with the guys that I trained with. I had this air of like, this is the only thing that works kind of idea in my head, which is probably not the coolest attitude to have, but nonetheless, it was definitely a recipe for success, because guys, otherwise they wouldn't be following me to do this stuff. You know, I didn't ask these people to do what I was doing. They just started kind of following suit. And as far as like, you know, guys coming in and out, there's guys that would stay there for long periods of a time. And that would be like the basis of our team. There's guys that would come back regularly. Guys started like messaging me directly from every corner of the earth. Hey, can I come train with you, you know, at Top Team? And so, yeah, guys would fly in for their camps or pre-camps or whatever. And, you know, we had our core base of guys. You know, we had guys that were regular, would routinely come in a few times a year. And that's it, man. We just, you know, it was a team. It was a team. We did everything together.
Nice. So that's, I guess then, you know, taking that style from Alliance and then just perpetuating that, which of course, yeah, as you say, Alliance definitely one of the top gyms in the world. Believe under Eric Del Fierro,
yeah.
And Brandon Vera, I know was
used to be.
Yeah, it used to be. Okay. And of course, you know, Dominic Cruz there now, Jeremy Stevens, Phil Davis. I'm sure I'm missing.
We had Alex Gustafson. We had Ross Pearson. We had a lot of guys, you know, in the height of their careers. So it was Michael Chandler, actually, who just fought. Michael Chandler was with us when he was in his first like run through the Bellator ranks. So yeah, we had a pretty deep gym.
So yeah, really, really high level stuff. And I mean, I've seen Dominic Cruz speaking highly about your wrestling and grappling style, saying that, you know, kind of what separates you is the, you know, the top pressure and then the bottlenecking people with punches to actually turn the grappling into ground and, you know, grapple boxing. So what's it like working with Dominic Cruz himself, and how did you go with, you know, developing that style of grappling and boxing?
So working with Dominic is interesting because we were teammates originally, right? And we did not get along very well. We both have very alpha personalities, and so we would clash pretty often. And, you know, as we've grown and matured, we both had a lot of our own bullshit that we brought to the table, a lot of our own nonsense. And so, yeah, as we've matured and, you know, I've resumed coming back as now a coach, like it took a good while to like really get him to trust me as a coach, because the guy knows a lot, right? So it's really interesting as a coach. The hardest guys to coach are established veterans when you don't have a relationship with them, right? Unless they personally seek you out, like, yeah, a lot of guys, they've got their own way of doing things. I've been doing it this long. Why do I need to change it? Or I've been successful this long. Why do I need to change it? So, yeah, there was that. And then Dominic knows more than most coaches, right? Dominic has a higher fight IQ than 99.9% of the coaches out there, right? So he's not just going to trust anything that comes down the pike. He asks questions. He will challenge you on everything. So, you know, working with Dominic has made me a better coach, because a lot of times I'm used to going into a room and everybody just taking my word for gospel and not questioning me. Not that they don't ask questions, but they're not going to question me or my methods. Dominic and I have bumped heads, not in a bad way, but like sometimes I got to tell him, hey, Dominic, just trust me and do this, you know? And yeah, so it's been good. It's been good for me. He's definitely a challenge, but the challenge has made me a better coach. And you know, we're pretty close friends as well now. So our relationship has definitely changed over the years. And, you know, but yeah, it took a while to earn that trust. And also you got to realize, like, with these guys that are legitimate superstars, everybody and their fucking mother wants to coach these guys, not because they want to coach them, but because they want the cosign, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I could get Dominic, you know, getting enough pictures with this guy or that guy. So, I mean, I could see like not being trusting of that, you know, because a lot of people come around to take from these people, right? So coaching is a very giving profession, right? You're giving a lot, But if you're going to coach a guy to take from them, I think they feel that, and they know when that's, and and I can be guilty of. I could have been guilty of the same things at certain times in my career. You know what I mean? Looking at athletes as like opportunities to promote myself as opposed to opportunities to help, somebody along in their career. So there's that. And then what was the second question about my bottlenecking and how I developed that? Yeah. So I think because of my Greco-Roman wrestling, grinding and top pressure was always pretty easy for me. I always just understood the feel of how to really like immobilize people. And then what started to happen was I got so good at immobilizing people, like with pins, like when I would get somebody in side control, if I just wanted to hold side control, then they weren't getting out. Okay. But the problem with that is in a fight, it doesn't really mean much. Right. So yeah, you can win a round by like getting side control and holding the guy. You're not going to win a lot of fans that way. And then if you get tired and they get up, now your arms are full of blood and you're not going to be able to box, right? So it can be really exhausting. It's a really poor use of energy. And so I started to realize that, like, as I started to challenge my kind of like play it safe mentality, I started to understand like how to get positions to progress themselves and, how to create flows between good top pressure, using strikes, maybe to get somebody to turtle away from me so I can either take the back or start to ride from there, and use a little bit more of a college wrestling approach of riding as opposed to like jiu-jitsu where you'd set hooks and look to attack the back. So, and I use both. So I think just really creating like to the best of my ability, trying to create the perfect pedigree between wrestling and jiu-jitsu and using the traits that they both offer. Because if you look at like a guy like Mike Chandler, right? Like he, prior to getting clipped with the left hand with Oliveira, he was shutting down the grappling, right? From the top position by not really engaging in the grappling in a jiu-jitsu sense, right? Mm-hmm. So one thing that I find really interesting, and I'm putting out an instructional on this quite soon. I have it all filmed and stuff. I just have to do the back end work to get it released. But one of the really interesting sort of facets of ground and pound is it's largely poorly executed even at the top levels, because when you learn jiu-jitsu for fighting, you often learn from a guy that has trained in the IBJJF point system. Okay. So if I'm, let's say, in a headquarters position landing shots, right, do I need to pass to get to side control? Okay. In an IBJJF tournament, yes, I do, right? Being in headquarters is nothing. I'm still actively trying to pass the guard. So I have to progress towards a finishing position, right? That's what the hierarchy is supposed to represent. So you learn that side control or side mount is better than half guard, even than being in half guard, or to be in a different position, right? And in like a knee shield or a knee cut position, that these are better. This is the hierarchy. So I quickly realized that's not true, right? And some people have exploited that. Like obviously, like a lot of people that fight know that half guard might be preferable to side control or some other position. So anyway, a lot of positions that produce pins, you can't hit the person. So that's not really great for pursuing a finish, right? If we're looking to progress our position, using my arms to hold somebody down in a position isn't great. So I started coming up with systems of how to use my legs to create pins, lower body pins, pinning the lower body. So if they can't move their hips, then they can't escape, right? If they can't clear the bottom leg, then they can't escape, right? And that leaves my hands free to do what I'm getting paid to do, which is damage the person, right? And then ultimately, when it's done at its best, it becomes a dance where we're kind of hovering back and forth between damage and then advancing position, damage and then advancing position, and which could either lead to a TKO or ultimately a submission of some sort.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Using the legs for pins, and I'll be very interested in purchasing that instructional when it does come out, because it is one of the biggest problems of people just being able to jump back up to their feet. Right. When you do open up for punches nowadays, and I mean, just backtracking a little, probably one of the best people at that is Dominic Cruz. And I just want to focus on, you mentioned, that process of building trust with the athlete, because it's one of the most important things to get that buy-in, to get people to actually listen and believe with, what you're saying. And even if it's not even an established vet, sometimes it's just going against, I saw this on YouTube or something, and they do it different. They do it differently or something like that. And I would imagine, Dominic Cruz has to be one of the most difficult people of all time. Because he is, as you said, he's so knowledgeable. And I think some of that would come through even in his, in his interviews that I've seen and his trash talk, where people will say, I'm going to knock you out. And he's challenging them.
How
are you going to do it? Tell me specifically, how that's going to happen. And any vagueness around it, I'll point out why it wouldn't work. And fair play to him. So how did you go about that process of building trust with him being so, so difficult maybe?
So it's pretty interesting. First off, I stopped trying to coach him, right? That was the first thing I did. I stopped trying to press my stuff on him because I didn't feel like it was going in a direction that I wanted. And, I think what ultimately really led to a really good, better relationship for us is that COVID happened. There was a lot of craziness during COVID, and basically I was at the gym every day when a lot of people weren't, for a lot of different reasons, and giving him consistent training and just showing up when I didn't need to, right? So I think he respected that enough to start to listen to me, and then started to see that the stuff that I was telling him was true. And I also had to kind of change my approach, the way that I communicate things. And this was an important lesson for me to learn as well. And he pointed this out to me. It's really important that in my vocabulary that I don't make a fighter feel wrong, right? So, because especially if you come from a house where maybe your parents made you feel wrong all the time or whatever, people shut down when you make them wrong, So just by changing my verbiage to, hey, can we try it like this, and explaining why I believe this is a better path for you to go, instead of telling them what they're doing is wrong. It's a little bit easier to communicate when you're not communicating in absolutes, and because if your absolute doesn't match up with somebody else's absolute, right? We have a clash of beliefs now, and not to get too philosophical, but anytime there's a clash of beliefs, no one in the history of arguments has ever changed anyone's political beliefs with an online debate, by telling them that they're wrong, right? You don't really achieve much by telling somebody that they're wrong. What you achieve great results with is explaining why you believe what you believe, and then showing tangible proof of its effectiveness. And so, I think it was just a lot of that stuff, learning how to communicate effectively with somebody like that, who is so brilliant in certain aspects of the sport, and and has their own beliefs about things. And it's crazy because now he rarely questions me as much. It's a lot easier for us to flow in a workout, where there would be a lot of days where it was a lot of starting and stopping. So now the practices tend to flow, and that trust has been achieved, interpersonally as well as on the mat. So it's really important. I've had long discussions about this with the other coach, Erik Uresk, about how important trust is on a team, with an athlete, just in general. If you ever observe a fight and the athlete is out there and they're well prepared, right? We did the whole camp together, and now I'm sitting in the corner and I'm yelling out instructions, and they stop doing the instructions, right? They cannot, for whatever reason, perform the instructions being given. It's almost as if they're not listening. What happens there is a lack of trust, right? Because their fear of failure becomes greater than their trust for you, right? And I think the key for a coach is to get their trust for you to be greater than their fear of failure. So even in the most tense moments, they're going to listen to the instruction and trust that, hey man, I might tell you to throw this punch and you get knocked out, right? I could have Sonny in there and I'll say, hey Sonny, pressure, step in, throw that right hand. You step in to throw that right hand, you get check hooked and you get fucking laid out. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't see what I saw, right? All I'm doing in the corner is giving you what I see as the best path to victory, right? I don't have any magic tricks like that are 100%. And some coaches do that better than others. Some coaches see the path to victory maybe a little bit more clear and concise than others. And cornering definitely makes a huge difference in the outcome of fights for sure. But it's like, it literally all comes down to trust, right? And it's like, man, when a fighter loses, you'll see whether they trust you or not real quick, because it's often when a lot of the blame and stuff starts to come out, and the lack of, and sometimes they're right. Sometimes you could say something of like, you know what, you're right. I didn't see that, or that was a bad call. I shouldn't have made that call in retrospect, right? But a lot of times there's just a lot of lack of accountability starts to come out. And it's a process, man. Like, learning to develop and then maintain trust it's probably the most important thing in coaching. It's probably the most important thing in coaching. If you don't trust me, right, I'm going to do a technique with you. And then when we go into live practice, you go back to doing what you always do. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the lack of trust, right? That's a lack of trust. And it just takes constant repetition, constant going through the motions, in and out of this stuff, and, making the athlete aware of what they're doing, but not making them wrong at the same time so that they don't completely shut down. So it's a very delicate thing, man. It's really interesting. Nothing stays the same. And you're constantly having to adjust and make fluctuations and things. And it's really fascinating. That's probably been the biggest eye opener for me in the last year as a coach, is the importance and the delicate nature of trust.
Definitely. As as you've mentioned, it's really everything to get athletes kind of on your side. And I like what you mentioned, kind of having to just give it to people give it to Dominic as a suggestion to try rather than a hard rule, because otherwise, you can get that solid pushback with certain people.
But some guys actually. So here's the thing, though. Some guys love when you say things with absolute decisiveness, right? So it's like figuring that out. So most people, in fact, I find it's actually interesting. The people I find that are natural born leaders, right? It's usually better that I go to them with a suggestion. People that like to be led, generally I can go to them a little bit more decisively. I just kind of drew that conclusion just now, but just in my thinking, it's just like, there's a lot of people don't want to think. They just want to say, all right, man, fucking just tell me what to do and I'll do it. It makes their life easier, I suppose. And then some people like to take a little bit more ownership over things, and that's fine. Neither is right or wrong, right? You can get great results either way, but there's no hard, fast rule on it. It's literally just figuring out how to reach that fighter.
Yeah, 100%. I know exactly what you're talking about there. And one thing that brings up for me is, then you mentioned like vulnerability at the start of the discussion, and then I'm wondering how you then go about balancing, or if even if you think it's a balance of between trust and vulnerability, between people who perhaps want to be led and might look at vulnerability as a weakness, as someone that they shouldn't follow, versus people who believe that actually creates more trust, and by someone sharing a vulnerable side. How do you find that there's a balance there that you have to work? Or? So
the thing with vulnerability, and most fighters are going to be adverse to vulnerability, particularly if it starts coming down to their emotional baggage and stuff like that. But a lot of times that stuff has to be looked at too. So I don't believe that we have parts of our life. I believe that every part connects to a whole, right? So you can't, if your personal life is a fucking mess, we're going to see that in the cage to some degree, right? If your financial life is a mess or whatever, anything that's sort of in disarray is going to affect the unit as a whole, right? And so oftentimes fighters don't trust because they're afraid of vulnerability, right? Because their caretakers failed their trust, and so, you know, in their mind, and it's a perfectly, you know, that's how trauma works, is that, you know, you get stuck in these old frames of mind that, you know, if you get stuck in a 5-year-old's understanding of trust and vulnerability as a 40-year-old man, you could see where that might create some problems when you're trying to deal in adult relationships, right? So yeah, I think what I try to do is I try to show them the value of vulnerability by being a good example. So I'm on the mat like pretty much every day, you know, with all of my students, whether it's my fighters or you know, and I'm training, and, you know, I'll still compete here and there in some super fight stuff. So, you know, I'm regularly training, and I make it a point to be vulnerable in my training, you know, work on the weak parts of my training, you know, work out of bad positions. I think in the writing that I put out a lot of personal vulnerability that people can read in my experiences. And I think the goal is just to be so transparent in experiences that are common, that, you know, but it's not common to talk about, right? So there's a lot of things that are common, but not common to talk about. So when people know that I used to be a junkie, and that I openly talk about being a coward as a fucking professional fighter, right? It's like that's not, you know, it's not a comfortable thing for me to say, but it's the truth. And why do I say it? I say it because it's important for me to acknowledge it so that I can walk in a different direction, right? Why was I a coward? Because I was afraid of being vulnerable, and in like shielding myself from all vulnerability, I made myself fragile, right? Truly fragile when my armor was sort of stripped away, right? So yeah, so I think people have a good sense when you're telling them your truth, like when you're being honest with them, and ultimately they'll respect that honesty. And not everybody's ready to open up all the way, and that's fine. That's where they're at in that journey. Sometimes you might have to let a fighter fail on their own accord, right? Okay, if that's how you're insisting on doing it, one of the biggest lessons I learned is that I have to the best of my ability, let each person have the dignity to learn from their own failure, right? So I could see somebody heading for a path of destruction, right? I know, right, as much as you can be sure about something, that this is not going to work out well, in the sense that there's going to be some consequences that person's not going to like, right? Maybe I know they're bullshitting in this fight camp, and that they're not going to have a good performance. I can't just go tell them that, right before the fight. So you watch, and okay, I'm going to let this person, I'm going to be there for this person while they fall on their face. And I'm not going to wait to the moment they get up and go, haha, I told you so, right? But as we start to have a conversation about that, I think one of the best things to ask somebody is, well, how is what you're doing working for you? Do you feel like what you're currently doing is working for you and like yielding you the results that you want? Well, if it's not, are you open to trying something different, right? And so if you can get them to like see that, if you can get them to see that what they're doing isn't working, now their mind has to open up to a different possibility, okay? If you can get their mind to open up to a different possibility, now we can start walking in a different direction together. And then, yeah, again, it's just a feeling process. You know, you can't kind of rush a lot of people too quickly into that stuff, but you give them a little bit at a time. It's like anything else, man. If you're trying to build some robustness in something, right, some strength in something, if I'm just teaching you how to work out, okay, and I drop like 400 kilos on a bar and then your spine breaks, that was too much stress for you to handle, you know, without having any practice, right? Okay, but maybe if I give you 50 kilo and I let you lift that a little bit, right, and you've never lifted before, and in a couple weeks, 50 kilo becomes nothing, you know, you're sore for a couple days, and then it's like, okay, now you can handle 60 kilo, and you know, incrementally we can start adding up on that. So yeah, that's part of our job as well, is not to add so much stress that the person breaks and definitely doesn't trust you again. It's incremental, and there's a lot of failures on the way up.
So yeah, just following on with that idea then of, you know, taking that weightlifting analogy, and then just, you know, that kind of that progressive loading of weights to build someone up. Do you have a style that you would kind of progressive loading of trust building for different athletes?
It's really done on feel and experience, you know, because everybody's so different. What might work if I'm working with you might be completely different to the next person. So yeah, I wish I had a cookie cutter answer that I could sell and market. You know what I mean? I'm all about making $1 when I can, but yeah, I don't have a cookie cutter way of doing that. I think one important thing is to get somebody to see the value of vulnerability, right? That vulnerability ultimately is an asset, right? If you face it, it's an asset. It's uncomfortable, but it's an asset because, like, I just wrote something about this today, actually. That I'm at my happiest when I'm making progress. Okay, whenever I feel like I'm not making progress, like I'm in a standstill, there's a few things that are going on for sure. I'm doing all of the same things that I've been doing for a given amount of time. So not only does that create similar results, but it often leads to a backtrack of results, like a sliding backwards. I don't really believe in like standing still. I believe there's progress or we're kind of sliding backwards a little bit. And so how do I get progress? Well, I have to make a lot of mistakes, right? Like if I'm drilling something new, I'm working on like no-gi barambolos right now, right? Was not the prettiest thing in the world the first few reps. If you look at my build, you can definitely see how it was not the prettiest thing in the world, right? And like repping it over and over and over again, like I have to have my wife memorize it because she's much better with patterns than I am. And then I'm basically having my wife teach me how to no-gi barambolo. And, it's but a lot of failure. Now, there's not the stress of feeling like a failure because my attitude is, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to try this and I'm going to keep doing it and I'm going to have fun with it. The problem with fighters comes in because their identity's on the line, right? So it's like, and that's the risk that you have to get them to be willing to take, right? Loving and hating yourself depending on a win or a loss is a fucking tough gamble. And some people are not going to trust you over that.
Yeah.
And but that's the limit. That for them is probably their limit then. Then you're limited to what you can do with that athlete. And I have to recognize that. And like, if that person's not willing to go past, like get into why that is, then I'm limited to what I can do with them to a large degree. But if somebody is willing to dive into that very, very uncomfortable terrain, then, I mean, the fucking chances are, the possibilities are endless then, right? So yeah, can I get them to see the value of vulnerability? Can I get them to see the value of not living and dying by whether you win or lose, so that you can be, because like, man, think about it. Like your freest expressions of martial arts are usually when you're having fun.
For sure.
Right. And that's my experience. And I think that's fair to say, like a lot of people would say the same, that when you're having the most fun out there, you feel the most free, the most loose. Like that's the freest expression of your martial art. Why? Because I'm not attaching my identity to it. And like ultimately, if you attach your, like, this is how the world is going to see me. People aren't going to love me the same. No one's going to look at me the same. I have all my value tied up in winning or losing. That is a tremendous pressure to carry you into a fight. So yeah, often that's one of the things that needs to be looked at with fighters, and do a lot of that now, man. Like, we don't force it on anybody, but we definitely like will guide people towards taking a peek at that stuff, because it's really fucking important. You know, it's the worst thing I can see is somebody like making a successful fight career, but still being unhappy because they have all their value tied up into those things and places that some of us maybe that are a little older or have a different type of experience know that that's not where it's going to come from. You know, like you could get the belts, you could get the groupies, you could get the free stuff, you can get the money, and you can still be miserable.
Yeah, and that's a daunting,
right?
a daunting prospect to look at, to have all that success and still be unhappy with who you are. Yeah. Although I'd like to try it, you know what I'm saying?
Right. No, hey, I think it's worth trying. It's worth trying to. Sometimes that's what you got to do, man. Sometimes you got to get all the things and get all the toys, and then not be happy.
Yeah, and then I guess that takes us back to then learning from your failures. The best.
That's when we're like, okay,
teacher, right?
That's not working, right? I mean, that's really like the ultimate thing that cuts through all my own bullshit. Is what I'm currently doing working? Is it giving me the results that I want? Okay, then why am I still doing it?
Yeah, yeah. It's always the big question of if you want different results, then you're gonna have to do something a bit differently.
Yeah, man. And that changes, that changes constantly.
Yeah. And just going back to then, creating the identities, or not attaching your identities to the fighters, and how you see that playing out with the pro fighters you've trained, because it's a very interesting balance. I mean, I laugh now because back when I was fighting, I probably never attached my identity to it completely, and I think maybe I could have benefited more by doing so at the time, by taking it more seriously. But I laugh because I would never wear any fighting shirts back when I was fighting, like the tap out. I'm like, nah, right. I don't want anyone, I don't need to wear that. I don't want to do it. And now like half my wardrobe is of fighting shirts now that I'm just coaching and just watching it. I'm like, yeah, I'll wear everything. Sure. But how do you find that balance for people to not take it seriously, and it's not my identity at all, or is that still the main goal, or how do you go about guiding people in that realm?
So it's not that I don't want them to take fighting seriously, right? But what I want them to see is that most of the time, the stress created by thinking that your only value in life is whether you win or lose is going to lead to diminishing returns, right? It gets you so stressed out and so tight and unable to do the things you do. It's going to create a lack of trust because you're ultimately going to survival mode when that happens, right? For a lot of people, like their identity, like that's like life or death, like how the world sees you and or how you see yourself in the world is really more appropriate. That feels like life and death to a lot of people. It did to me. It felt like life and death. Like, I know a lot of guys, and I won't name any of them, and myself included, that would get suicidal after a loss. What's the point? That kind of self-hatred and self-look. And because a lot of us don't come from good places. So I think the important thing to understand too is when you come from a background where you're essentially like, maybe you're told you're a piece of shit, maybe you're abused, right? In some way or form, you don't have a lot of love in your life, right? But people applaud a guy that can fight, right? Even if it's just a neighborhood guy, the toughest guy in the neighborhood, he gets free drinks at the bar. He might get laid because of it. There's a lot of perks that come with it, right? And so when you don't know what love is, you'll just take any kind of positive attention as love. It's fucking better than your dad, kicking you with a fucking work boot on, right? So it's like, so that looks like love. And then you're going to do anything you can to cling on to that if that's all you know is love. Okay? So for me, I had to learn what does like a healthier version of love look like first, And then like once I learned, that doesn't always mean that everything has to feel good. Sometimes like if your parents love you, like discipline is because they want you to learn from a lesson, or they want you to, you can't have everything that you want. You start to learn like the healthy kind of love, like guidance, right? It looks a little bit different than that. So sometimes it might take a little bit of personal work, like getting out of these old beliefs that love is like your Instagram followers telling you how great you are, right? But that sounds crazy, but that's a currency. I could get high off that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I could get high. If I write something and people are telling me how like great and profound it is, I love that shit, right? But it's also really it can get really unhealthy as well, because now I need to do that. I need to write something. Now I need to write something else so that they can tell me again, because they're going to forget about this. And then like now my motivation for writing that is not what it was, right? Before I was just writing what I was feeling at the time. Now I'm writing something so that you'll tell me how great I am. And then if I don't have that feeling long enough, right, I need that dopamine high. So yeah, it's fuck, man. It's really complicated. And there really is I don't have a cookie cutter answer other than provide a place of safety for people to feel like they can fail in front of you, and then just take the steps that come as that moves along. I think that's something I really failed at for a long time, is I probably didn't make people feel the safest just because of my nature and my perfectionist nature. I'd be saying one thing, but my perfectionist nature would not let them feel safe. also, I'm not the most approachable looking character either. So sometimes that takes a little bit of getting past. But yeah, providing a sort of safe environment for people to fail, to be themselves, come what may, and then try to make steps in a healthier direction. I think if like I had to give like a great place to start would be that, right? Is give people a healthy place to feel safe to fail in front of you and look stupid or whatever it may be, and then still love them despite all that, or give love to them despite all that, and then we come back another, and we try again the next day and try some different stuff the next day. And because I'm still learning about this stuff myself, about how to do that, not just for other people, but do it for myself and the people around me. So I've learned far more from the people I've coached, than I'm sure that I've helped them learn just by failing constantly. Like I fuck up a lot. So, I like the dignity, please give me the same space if you can to mess up, because I'm going to undoubtedly.
Yeah, I hear you. Me too. And
it's fucking hard, isn't it?
Oh man, I don't know. That's I'd like to meet these people who win at everything and never fail, because
I lose a lot.
Yeah. But you said you didn't have a cookie cutter answer, and it probably wasn't cookie cutter. I think you're kind of working it out. As you're saying, kind of as you're going along and just trying. But I've actually thought that was a really good answer of providing people a place where they can fail and still be comfortable and, unjudging and still feel loved, for their failures is going to help build that trust. And that just seems like a healthy attitude to have, especially, in the gym, training people where there's going to be failures countless times. And, and then if they go out onto the stage with the bright lights, some people can stay undefeated, but most people, especially in MMA, there's going to be L's along the way, right?
Did you watch the main event this weekend?
Yes.
I think that's like one of the best case studies, just like for that conversation. It's like, okay, think about being Michael Chandler. You go out, you get your back taken by fucking Charles Oliveira in the first minute of the fight, right? That's like, could not be worse of a nightmare situation.
Yeah.
Right? That's literally the worst way he could have started the fight, perhaps. Works his way out of it, turns it around, nearly finishes him in the first round, takes the round back after giving up his back for a good minute or so, right? Wins the round on my scorecard, right? I thought Chandler took that round until ultimately he came the closest to ending the fight. And then, so now you have both of those guys have to overcome some adversity in that first round, like near fight-ending adversity. And then Charles Oliveira gets his act together, gets his head together, and comes out and lands that beautiful hook and changes the whole fucking fight. Like those are two gentlemen that are familiar with adversity and vulnerability and discomfort, right? However you want to phrase it to yourself, it's like, wow, like that's what it looks like at the highest level.
Yeah, for the 100%. I mean, that's when he had his back taken. I can't imagine what's going through his head, or maybe he's just trying to, in the moment, trying not to think. But I'm sure he would have, game planned worst case scenarios of having Oliveira, grappling, and it's like, boom, you're there.
The crazy lesson for me, and this is something that I tell fighters a lot, and it's a very uncomfortable thing to digest, but it's like, man, in the case of Chandler, you could see how hard he worked, right? And how prepared he was, how good he looked in the fight. I mean, he looked great up until the moment he got caught, right? It's like, you can do everything necessary, kill yourself to get ready for that fight, really go through the fire and still come up short, right? There's no fucking guarantees. And I've seen people want the guarantee because they worked hard, right?
Makes
that's
sense.
A hard one to get, right? It's like, no, I should, there's a sense of entitlement that because I trained hard, I deserve to win. It's like, yeah, no, that's not how it works, right? Like, you literally have to be willing, I think, to really go in there healthy and open. It's like, you have to go in there having done everything within your power and still be willing for that not to be enough. Like, you have to be okay with that not being enough. because if my effort is contingent upon needing to be guaranteed results, like, am I going to try next time if that doesn't work? You know, like it can get a little ugly for people.
Yeah, and that is a tough reality.
It's fucking hard, man.
That's
That is not a small
hard.
task. Yeah,
That's not
yeah.
small.
It's not a small task, but it's like, that's one I would like people to sit with. It's like, if you really think about it, because ultimately that's the only thing you can control is your effort. I don't control the outcome, right? I literally don't control anything. I could fucking slip on the way to the cage and ding my knee up a little bit to the point where it's affecting me in there. I still got to fight. I could have had a bad weight cut. You know what I mean? I still got to fight. So all that stuff said, it's like, yeah, my effort is the only thing I can control in there. So it's a good thing to like recognize the things you do and don't control, so that you don't put energy into things you don't control. And effort is literally the only one you got.
That's 100%. That's all you got. And you got to be, yeah, like you said, just willing for that not to be enough. It's crazy. Yeah. It's a big risk to take that many people don't want to take, and it's easier not to.
Yeah, definitely easier not to. It's so easy not to, man. That's why fighting's it's definitely not for. That's why everybody's not in a cage fight all the time, or doing these very, you know, difficult athletic endeavors, man. It's I applaud anybody that gets in there. You know, at any level. It's very daunting, man. Like hearing, you know, being inside that cage and looking at the crowd, and I've been in the locker room, and I know other guys have had this thought too, because I've had conversations with people where you just want to get knocked out in the locker room so you don't have to go out and fight. You know, you're like, why am I doing this? This is so stressful. Like, it's fucking scary, and you just wish that you weren't there anymore, or that something would happen to you so you don't have to go out, or a fucking bomb would get called in or something like that, so that you don't have to go make that scary walk and put yourself out there on the line. I mean, yeah, it's a lot, man. It's a lot. So I respect anybody that gets out there and does it at any level. It's you know, everybody's fight is the most important fight to them, you know? So it's they get all the stress that comes with it, whether it's a world title or, you know, some local show in Australia. It's the same thing for that person, and they're having the same feelings, and yeah, man, it's that's a wild ride.
It is. We're wild to think about it. Yeah, those fight shows, everyone on that card, it's the most important thing in their life at the moment.
Yeah.
Or it should be, at least.
Yeah,
probably is. Hopefully it is.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, there've been some great things you've mentioned. Over the course of this chat. So I think maybe to wrap up, I'm wondering, you know, maybe a shift of gears, but I mentioned it at the start, your time bouncing, and I've read a bunch of your stories online, and they're fascinating. And maybe just to finish up, if there's a story that maybe you could share from that time I mean, if you could relate it back into what we've been talking about, even better. But
I mean, we were pretty degenerative characters at this time in my life, so that there was not a lot of
trust and vulnerability going on.
No, literally the opposite of trust and vulnerability. So I was actually sober the whole time working in nightclubs. I got sober when I was 23. I started working in nightclubs 10 months into being sober. Prior to that, girls would not even look at me because I was so fucking scary. I had like a serial killer vibe going on, and getting thrown into this world of excess where it's like drugs, sex, late night parties. You know, like sometimes we wouldn't arrive to some of these places till like 6 a.m. And then go all day Sunday afternoon type of deal. And so obviously I'm not a big guy. Your audience may not be able to see that on the camera or whatever, but I'm 5'6", so like 165 centimeters, something like that. Not tall. I was about 160 pounds at the time, and everybody that I worked with was about 6'6", you know, 260 pounds, 300 pounds, large gentlemen. And they look like comic book characters, and they openly talked about their steroid use and their drug use. And I never heard people talk about this. Like, I came from a sports background where like that was very taboo, especially like in American wrestling. Like, I was like not looked on highly. So I'm looking at these guys, and a lot of them were school teachers, oddly enough, which is a little bit strange. But Yeah, man. The first thing they showed me was where they hide their liquor for their consumption during work, and that they pretty much all did ecstasy every night that we were working. They were usually more fucked up than the patrons. And I quickly learned like all the little hustles that we have. So like there's a bunch of different hustles. My main one was catching people doing drugs or finding drug dealers, and then basically like bribing them or taking their stuff and selling it, taking their stuff and selling it back to them, getting them to walk to the ATM machine to pay me to stay in the club. We had all these little hustles going on. And I mean, there were nights where I'd be in a club, I'd see some big, this is like the heyday of doing steroids in like New York, right? So like if you're like Jersey Shore type of dudes and big jack juice heads. And they would be like my little ass dragging some guy that's like 250, 260 pounds, holding onto the wall, screaming for dear life while he's got some little guy on his ankles because he doesn't want to leave the bathroom because he got caught doing cocaine, and I made a name for myself, like dumping a lot of those guys on their head. It's unfair when you're trained, even though they're much bigger than you. And I knew this, like I had trained with large men before. I prefer going against heavyweights in grappling matches. It's quite easy for me. There's nothing for them to grab on me. And I would turn a lot of these guys upside down and drop them on their head and make sure a lot of people saw it. And you get popular real quick and got a little bit of local celebrity and a giant hole in my soul at the same time. But it was like literally, kind of going back to our conversation, it was literally like getting the keys to the kingdom, if you will, right? Like all the excess you can muster and all the attention and all the glitz and lights and stuff like that, and being miserable.
There you go.
Yeah, but I had I had a lot of laughs. So even though I was like personally a miserable person, I definitely I still had a lot of laughs at the expense of other people. But it was it's not anything I could go back to, I don't think. I think the stories are funny. I think degenerate behavior is still funny when I see it. I like seeing people inappropriately drunk at the wrong places and exposing themselves when it's not acceptable, and I think that shit's great, and I hope it continues for the rest of my life. But I just don't want to partake in it anymore.
Fair play. I think that's a great spot to finish up. Puts a nice little way to wrap things up. And I think it gives good context too to what you're saying earlier, because it's, as you're saying about vulnerability, it's kind of easier for someone to say, suggest that if they have, nothing to kind of be vulnerable about.
Right.
But yeah, to have that wide gamut of life experiences kind of adds a bit of weight and real meaning behind it. So, no, thank you very much for sharing that with me. 100%, really appreciative. And so, Erik, if people want to get in touch with you, maybe they want to read some of those stories.
Yeah. So my Instagram is like the best way to pick up my content right now. So Erik the Gentleman. I'm sure there'll be a tag or something like that you guys can follow on Instagram. That's where I put a lot of my you can kind of keep up with what I'm doing on there the easiest. I've got I put out newsletters and stuff like that. There's actually a link to my newsletter that I just started writing again recently, so that's on my Instagram bio. People want to DM me for anything that they're interested in, seminars, speaking engagements, anything like that. Check my DMs and I will get back to you at some point in time. So, man, I just like sharing my journey with people. I'm a bit introverted, but so that's the way I kind of connect with people is by, sharing my experiences through writing or speaking or whatever. And I do enjoy it. So
awesome. Well, I have enjoyed speaking to you this morning or this afternoon over there.
Yeah, right on. Me too, man.
Thank you so much, and hope you can do it again sometime.
All right. Yeah, sounds good, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Erik.
All right, thank you, brother.
You have been listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Until next time, you can visit sonnybrown.net to find out more ways to break it down.